Welcome to our November Facebook Live. It'll be probably one of two this month, as we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to discuss. My name's Leighton Drury, obviously State Secretary, and with me is the President of the Union, Mick Nan.
Evening all.
Look, we've got a fair bit to discuss today, and so we'll move straight into it. Firstly, I'd like to thank the over 600 members that attended AGMs and SGMs last week. There was some really good discussion, obviously about our award and where we're going with first responder and some other issues. And one of those I'd like to bring up right now, and that is Greg Matthews' life membership. Greg was an absolute stalwart for this union. He's going on leave now, and we'll be retiring from the union certainly at the end of this month. And the membership voted on that last week to make Greg Matthews our newest life member, and we've put him on the board today. There he is down the bottom. Very long and distinguished list of life members. Mick, did you want to say a piece about Greg?
Yeah, look, absolutely amazing bloke. Anyone that's worked with Greg over the years will have seen just how dedicated he is. It's been very impressive to be lucky enough to experience working with him over this last 18 months especially. Basically whenever I've been scratching my head trying to work out exactly where to go, quite often I've found myself calling Greg, and that experience that he's had over these 20 odd years he's worked with us has been amazing. 20 years working for us, 5 or 6 years as a SCOM rep before that, and station delegate for I think a couple of decades before that. So absolute stalwart. He's going to be severely missed by all of us, and hope he looks forward to a bit of quiet time and switching off his mobile phone for a while.
Yeah, no, well said, comrade. Look, another thing of note that we should always celebrate our wins. It's basically our first year anniversary of our cancer legislation that was put through Parliament last year. Most of you would be aware that we're now covered for 12 cancers under the workers' comp system. So yeah, great win by members in that, and we'll be looking forward to sort of strengthening that legislation and certainly protecting it as we go forward. Topics to be discussed tonight, and there's some really big things going on, and hopefully people are reading the sit reps and understanding where some of the big stuff that's going on. First of all is one of the current issues. I'll run through them. It's obviously the rescinding of 0822, and everyone glazes their eyes over when we say that, but we'll run through that so people really understand where that issue is going, because that is a big ticket item that the union's dealing with at the moment. You would have seen recently some of the media that the union's been doing around cladding, and certainly the budget cuts that fire rescue have received are leading to, obviously, we've got less permanent firefighters now than we did before, and certainly that's affecting us in areas like fire safety. But we'll have a chat about that as well. Obviously, we'll do a bit of a quick wrap around the award. We're not going to, at this stage, talk too much tactics and strategies or give our position away around the award, obviously, but we certainly want to have a conversation with people about where we're going, what we're doing, and how you guys get involved with that. We'll talk about our organising plan that we've put into place, which is successful, and then hopefully at the end of that, if we've got any time, we'll take the odd question. So, the in order of 2008-22, and look, please just bear with me on this. This is a little bit dry, but it is a very important. It is a very important issue. It was out of a dispute around the award round back in 2008, and it was about the tolling, or in some ways supposed to keep online retained appliances. Now, the department came to us this year, and they've come to us over a number of years trying to change that. And obviously get more flexibility or do more things with it. We've listed that dispute in the IRC, and there's been a couple of different things that have gone on there. We've got the status quo remained up until Monday, except for permanent doing overtime within the 60 k's of the permanent station. But we had to put a position back to them. So we put a position to them which we thought was fair. It put in some rules and some guidelines about how decisions were supposed to be made. We try to protect obviously minimum staffing. I'd like to point out that Mr. Futrell's put out a blog as well saying that tolling of permanent appliances is off the cards, and certainly minimum staffing is not under attack. We went to the Commission and we were to discuss a bit further, and I believe the two parties walked away from that with two different views on Monday, if I'm going to be clear, to be honest about it. They thought they got what they wanted, and we thought, we understood things in a different way. But that all got clarified in the Commission today. The President, do you want to run through some of these things? Whilst I was doing media today, the President went to the Commission and probably has a better view on what's going on.
Yeah, look, thanks, Leighton. Today we were back in the Commission disputing what we believed on Monday was an agreement around how this was going to work moving forward till I think we're back in there about December 13th. But clearly what we thought was going to happen, which was basically that status quo Leighton just described, where the 0822 sort of continued to function with the easing of the 60-kilometre rule for permanents. The Brigade had a different take on that, and they sent some correspondence out late yesterday afternoon looking to start at 6 o'clock this morning in a zone risk-based response based on well, that's the million-dollar question. We're still trying to work out what that's based on. Getting the clarity on that is really what we're trying to push. But long story short, today, basically the Commissioner was very open and accepting that clearly what we both thought were agreements on Monday weren't, and that both sides are now still disputing exactly where we're at and what we want to see in that interim. So that will be back in the Commission at this stage Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Not ideal, but that's what happens with these things, and that'll be around our ban that we have in place, which you saw in the Code Red issued last night. There'll be an update to that after this.
Yeah, look, to be clear, I've got the drafted update ready to go out, which we're reading off, and it explains further what the process going forward is. So on Saturday we'll be giving evidence about our Code Red, and I think the Fire Rescue will ask the IRC to rule against any bans on an urgent basis. So that's being heard on Saturday. There'll be a determination on what is the status quo regarding minimum crewing and what tolling involves. So certainly Mr. Futrell, when he came out there and said we won't be tolling permanent stations, but then what we saw in the correspondence out to our members was that permanent tolling is on the books, and that the moving of a permanent appliance, say, out of Balcombe Hills, hello David Elliott if you're watching, sending that appliance all the way to Richmond isn't tolling. Well, I disagree. That there is now no fire truck in Balcombe Hills, and therefore that creates a bigger hole, longer response times, and a threat to the community as well as firefighters, and we call that tolling. They say, well, that published online, it's just in the system somewhere, but no, we absolutely disagree, and we'll be having certainly we'll be talking about that and a big conversation around that. But that first point around minimum crewing, that's what's at stake here. They took that off the table, and now they've thrown it back on the table again. So we're not quite, the department are flip-flopping on their position at the moment, which is why we can't get anything in writing, because I don't think they have a position yet. So we'll be taking that to the Commission for 13th of December.
Yeah, watch this space, I suppose. As we say, this is critical. It is really to do with minimum staffing and massive implications for both permanent and retained.
Now, I know a lot of people have been talking about 2008-22 came out of full bench decision. Things have changed a little bit then. I don't think they've changed enough, but Fire Rescue are also running determination in the IRC about whether there is the IRC has a jurisdictional basis to do this. So that'll be heard on the 13th of December. And then the next issue, because it's all now been split up into 4 different components, so to speak. We'll be talking about 1920, the actual issue, which is the new in order 1920, the rescinding of 0822, minimum crewing, and that hearing date is yet to be determined, but I would suggest probably in 2020 that'll be heard then. So, is there anything else you wanted to be?
Oh, no, look, I think that sums it up, I suppose. It's just that it's important for the members to sort of read this and understand it and just be very aware that the biggest problems we are facing here is an attack on our minimum staffing and for retained as well, obviously. Massive concerns around that reduction in call rate and tolling of retained stations and then moving permanents up. So, tolling of 2 stations effectively as we see it. So, yeah, plenty more to follow.
Yeah, and look, have a look at the last night's notice and the amended notice that we put out tonight. You'll see the dot points. We're not even sure if that's the full gambit of what fire rescue are proposing. They're certainly not telling us, and they're not telling the Commission. But you can see sort of the nastiness that's involved with that and what we're up against. So. Chat to your station delegates about this. Make sure that you're up to date on where we're at with this as it progresses, because we'll be asking for input and different information if and when we need to. So cladding. Cladding became a big issue this week. There was a report out. So 2 things have occurred. Obviously. The initial report for Grenfell came out, I believe, last week. The CFMEU has released a report about cladding in New South Wales and the problems that it has, and certainly the union was called for comment. Now, there was a lot of conversation about this list being secret. I'm not going to speak for the union on whether that list should be secret or not. There seems to be some points of view that it may lead to arson or terrorism. That's what Fire Rescue's told me. Now, I'm going to get a full briefing on that, and I'll be taking that back to State Committee about whether we have a position on that. But I think I'm on solid ground saying that people of the public who own these buildings and work in these buildings should know. They're obviously at a higher risk if we have an incident at one of these things. But one thing I did, I think, hopefully pointed out successfully to all the media that I did is that if you cut, if you let the building industry self-regulate and you water down regulations, and then you go and cut fire service budgets like we've seen in New South Wales and certainly what they saw in London, you end up with a disaster. Now that is the New South Wales government is on notice, and they should be very clear about this. Is that if you keep cutting our budget and you don't, and the regulations that you've let to, just let the building industry run wild, we're going to have massive problems, and they're seeing they're knocking on your front doorstep, Opal Tower, Mascot Tower, and Cladding. This is a big risk for firefighters and the communities that they serve. So we'll be taking task on that as much as possible. Did you want to add anything on that, Mick?
No, probably only, you did touch on, this goes back to the building regulations as well, so not just cladding. Opal Tower, as you pointed out, first responders on the scene were us. It was firefighters rocking in. Good mate of mine, Tim Horder, just got married. Congratulations. But firefighters are rocking up to those things as well when people can't get out of their buildings. So it has many facets, as Leighton's touched on, and it comes back to budget cuts and not putting firefighters where we need to be on those front lines and carrying out those building inspections as well. So
and absolutely, one of the biggest I suppose things at that regulation level is that our fire safety people used to must provide an initial fire safety report. Now that's May. Now, our fire is that they do awesome work in fire safety. They haven't been funded properly. They're not being resourced properly. We need more bodies in there because they are the first point of call for that life of that building, because firefighters, are at nearly every step of the stage through the life of a building, at the moment of concept all the way to the, the destruction of. We do maintenance of these things. We do PRPs of these things. Firefighters are key, integral part of what keeps these things going. So we've been pushing for that. Hopefully Fire Rescue will go and have a chat with the Minister about that. Hopefully the Minister will listen to this. This is not union chest beating here. These are significant problems that need significant fixes. So a call on David Elliott to fix these things.
Yep.
Well, look, Mick's going to quickly have a chat about the way forward for our award. So I'll give a very brief overview. It was great to have that conversation with hundreds of members last week about the department's view, what we thought, what you guys have been telling us in the survey that we put out a couple of months ago. like I said, we're not going to go into that too much tonight, but certainly it was a good conversation around those 14 points. I think everyone's well aware of the department's position and what they want out of it. I think certainly I got a very good sense of, I think, where the membership's at on the department side. So going forward,
yeah, look, so going forward, and we pointed this out at those meetings, and just quickly for those, if you're seeing them laying around the stations, we have handed out the 14 discussion points Leighton mentioned that the department wanted to discuss with us. So have a good look at those, and as we say, reach out if you want to get in touch with us, get in touch with your SCOM reps, hopefully get in touch with your station delegates. We'll move into that as well shortly, our plans with station delegates and training and where we're looking to move as a membership. But check those points out. We're not going to go into depth here, as Leighton said, because, you know, strategically we want to play some cards close to our chest, but the feedback we did get was pretty overwhelming and pretty consistent on those points. So we'll be moving forward and fleshing out a few more of those, and, you know, having chats with the department on which ones we don't think are going to work at this point. But the next steps are to continue with the member engagement. So if you've got those ideas, as I say, pump them back through to us, you know, email into the office, contact your SCOM reps, get a hold of your station delegates if you've got them. If you don't have one, sign up, stick your hand up, call the office. We can get you all signed up and work on getting you some training. We're going to continue our discussions with the employer. We have a meeting next week?
I believe next week. Yeah.
I think next week for the third meeting we're going to have had with them. You know, we've got some points we touched on at those meetings I won't go into here as well that you guys have reported back to us through our survey. Leighton will probably talk about the survey a little bit later on as well. We'll refer back to that for a few good points. We had some great coverage and great response from our members on that. But that process will be a tic-tac back and forwards between the department. We'll keep talking to the membership. We'll run another Facebook Live or 2 or 3 or 4 on the award, probably as it leads up into February next year. Probably a couple more SGMs as well. So getting back out and talking face-to-face. As Leighton pointed out, we hit 600 members. It was quite a great thing to see, and you know, big meetings at all the stations that we went to and held them. So massive thank you to those people who put in that time. Plenty of people coming off shift, which is always great to see, and really good, mature conversation around some good topics off that award discussion. So plenty more to come on that. And I say, if you're ever in question, get a hold. As I say, I can't stress it enough. Sorry, and I'm repeating myself, but get a hold of those station delegates or talk to your SCOM rep. Like, we want this conversation to be as free flowing as possible, and we'll keep doing that backwards and forwards. So plenty more to follow on that. I suppose the final layout of that will be once we have that put together, we will be back to the membership, obviously, to vote on things. 2 things that were pointed out a lot through those meetings, and they're perennial questions that, you know, plenty of SCOMsters before me have had, is around breaking down conditions, obviously, but also if we do get to a point in an award, if things are linked together. So having that discussion and explaining what's linked and why, and making that choice as to whether we accept that or not. I don't think it's something to fear, and we've been pushing really hard for everybody to get on board and understand that. And look, the intention from Leighton and I and the rest of the State Committee is to make sure if something is linked for some reason, you'll fully understand it, you have plenty of notice, and then you can make an informed decision on whether you support that or not. So they were the biggest wraps that I got out of that.
We'll narrow that scope at that point, sort of end of November, early December, based on obviously some timing with meetings in the department. If you guys hopefully will narrow that scope, we'll fully explain sort of some of the positions the department have put forward and obviously ours, and then you'll narrow that, and then we'll go negotiate with the employer and see what those clauses look like. The department shuts down, unfortunately, or all of government shuts down from about December 20 through to sort of mid-January, and then you know, hopefully we'll have all those negotiations done. Well, then we'll be back to you guys about what that final product looked like. You know, vote, finalise, and you know, hopefully we've got an award sometime around the end of February. Now, there's a couple of things that have got to occur that both us and Fire Rescue need to deal with. The Expenditure Review Committee and the Wages Policy Task Force have to meet sometime between, you know, us, you know, finalising the award and voting on the award. There's meetings in government that obviously have got nothing to do with us and Fire Rescue, and that sometimes hampers that process right at the end, and sometimes it does move a little bit quickly. So just be aware of that. Hopefully everyone will be on board and understand where we're at and why it goes. So when we get to that point, it's not a big rush at the end. So just keep aware of that. And as Mick said, get a hold of your station delegate. It's one of our big pushes at the moment. On to our organising plan. Did you want to start with this?
Yeah, look, I suppose I touched on it earlier, but you know, we've got 3 new organisers that have come on board this year, and as we've just mentioned, Greg's pulling the pin. Now, Greg was traditionally running around in the country doing our retained and country members. So now with 3 new organisers, our model's been to split them up, very loosely at this stage, into regions and get them out covering that ground. Now, some of the things we've noticed that we really want to improve on is actually getting a comprehensive list and getting station delegates back up and running. You know, for many reasons, it's dropped away over the years. I personally have a big passion with this. I came on board and got interested in the union back in 2007-8, I suppose. I'd been in the job for 5-6 years. And it was on the back of a big campaign to sign up station delegates. So, you know, the thing that drew me in was getting that face-to-face time and a little bit of training and actually getting an understanding about what you can do as a station delegate, how you can help, you know, members at the station and push issues. So learning to campaign, I suppose, at the very, very basic of it. So look, our models are to do that. We've been out pushing firefighters to get station delegates lined up. Our new organisers have been out hitting stations. Just trying to think. You know, I think we're close to about 100 new station delegates that have put their hand up, and that's amazing. And you know, it's a great start, and hopefully that's only going to speed up. We're looking to get out early next year and start working on some basic training, and probably a big training session towards the end of next year where we get those delegates in, whether that's here or regionally. We haven't quite worked that out yet, but nonetheless, having them all come together and get some good training on mass and meet each other and get that network happening.
One of the big things that came out of our survey is that, one, a lot of members hadn't been to a union meeting, and yet you talk about your wages conditions, you know, every day at work. And so we needed to fix that. You know, there was 50% of permanents hadn't had a sub-branch secretary visit their station. 65% of retained, so they hadn't. So we are changing that. You know, 95% of people that responded to our survey want to participate in their union. They want to be talking to their union, and that's what we're doing. This is this organising model that we're pushing out. It's not just about the organisers, it's about organisers building station delegates up, those station delegates getting trained, and then, you know, you've now got, sorry, there was a comment there from Billy Mack, was there? It just shot across the screen. Maybe the person in the background. Hi, Billy. Thank you, comrade. Billy's an absolute retired member stalwart on the Central Coast. Hello, comrade. I'll be up there for the night soon. But one of the big things, so you guys want to participate, and you guys want to, you know, be organised, and that's how we're going to build our power, and we're going to build the structures that build that power. You know, obviously station delegates have been on the decline for a while now, and it's because they weren't being empowered and they weren't being given things to do. So we're building everything around our station delegates. They're going to be the link to the officials and to the membership, and vice versa. They'll be supported by, as Mick said, by the organisers. We'll be giving them training. And then hopefully those delegates, you know, back end of next year, we've got 100. That's the goal that I've set the organisers to do. We need 100 trained delegates by roughly this time next year. We'll be holding a delegates conference. They'll be giving they'll give us a broad strategic view, hopefully, going forward into the future about where we go and how we do that. So look, if you don't have a station delegate in your station, stick your hand up. It's not a lot of work. It's just a few conversations, but that is how we are going to move forward into the future. Did you want to finish on anything with that, comrade, or?
Oh no, I think that sums it up pretty well. Yeah, look, it's going to take a while, but building that structure back up, and I say, like, from my experience, getting it up to that level where a station delegate does feel comfortable and confident to take on issues for members and be able to chase their official or chase the union office and answer a lot of those everyday questions, I suppose, that makes a big difference and keeps everyone empowered. I suppose on a little bit broader stroke as well, we're also looking at how we include them more into probably our rules and into our governing structures and really, I suppose, in our medium to long-term planning. So as a union, what are our goals and where do we want to be? At the moment, I guess that probably falls to the state committee. And I think that if we can empower those station delegates to have a big part in driving that, we're actually going to get a lot more buy-in, hopefully, from members and have everyone got a much clearer picture of what the union's doing and why and where it's heading. So we'll keep working away at that.
Yeah, so I'm just having a look at some of the comments that we've got there. Just one other point that I'll make on our delegate structure. We've obviously got a whole bunch of people signing up to station delegates. We'll start getting information to you guys shortly. The delegates training should be starting in January. We'll give you hopefully enough notice that you can start picking your dates and times. We'll be doing them roughly in groups of 10. And then we'll sort of work out, we'll be obviously doing them not just in Sydney but regionally as well. So the training's coming and we'll get on top of that moving forward. Look, this one of the biggest discussions around the AGM, and certainly I'm just scrolling through some of these and I won't read all these out, but there's the conversation about the forum, the Unions Forum on its website. Now certainly we had some resourcing issues back in May, and both the President and myself made a decision on what we needed to resource. Obviously, the President came in and was working a lot of hours, and we've been building to get back up on top of things. We've now got our organisers. We've got 4 industrial officers, and we're back in a space now where we can see about what else we're going to do. Obviously, the Facebook Lives also dropped off. The President and myself are pushing anywhere between 60 and 80 hours a week, and looking after members through their disciplinaries, wages, and all those other things. Unfortunately, they came first. But we are at a stage now where we can go out and release ourselves to do these other things. And the forum does come up, and I know a lot of people are thinking about the forum. So with the change, I suppose, that we've had recently, it's certainly, I'm in a place where we're looking at everything that we've done before and do we use that going into the future. We've got, when we talked about, we asked you in the survey, how do you communicate with us? Do you read SITREP? Do you read it by email? Interestingly, we put out the survey by email, so 75% of people said they read SITREP by email, so I don't think that's a big stat there. But one of the interesting stats was that only 11% of retained firefighters that participated in the survey have ever logged in or contributed on the forum. So that's a very, very, very small figure. And the other point that I'd make here is that 25% of permanent firefighters say they've ever read and contributed to the forum. So I'm not saying it's that more people that didn't fill out the survey and don't, but I would assume that a lot of the people that filled in our survey are our active members. They're I can't remember.
Most engaged, yeah.
They are most engaged, so I would assume that a lot of those would be there. So it's quite a small amount of people. And one of the issues with the forum, and that we're looking into, is that it is, historically a high resourcing load to keep it up and going and current, moderating, doing all the stuff in the background with that. So we're having a look at that. We also got some statistics out of the back end of the forum about, so when it kicked off back in 2010, sorry, this is a bit small on this screen, I'll just have a quick look here. And so back in 2009, it exponentially grew through to 2011, and it was its peak around the 2011, funnily up to 2012, probably around the workers' comp strike. But since then, it's been in decline. With I think 2.2 million views in 2012, down to sort of 400,000 views. So it's dropped to 25% of what it's of activity that I've had. Now that's probably a number of reasons. I don't think necessarily that because the forum was anything bad, or I think there was things that went on in there that probably shouldn't have been.
Facebook came along around that same time, so that decline is probably also people going to open social media for discussions and various platforms.
So what I said at the meetings was that we're reviewing how we're going to use the forum going forward. I think there are spaces for it to play that we can. do things in it. But one thing I think the forum took away from, which is my view, we'll be talking to the committee about this, is that our activism and our delegates started to drop the moment the forum took over. And I think it was used, I think our delegates and our communications got stuck there, and then we lost our power, lost our delegates, and then lost our activism. And that is just my view on that. But again, I can see that there's people out there that wanted to have a discussion in that place. We had a very good conversation at Huntingwood about whether we can use this for polls, or I think they're reasonably successful and so that less sort of resourcing. So on top of that, I think we need to do more of these things. These are quite interactive. They can be watched at any time. You can turn them on, turn them off. I think face-to-face engagement, where you're talking at somebody, you see what they're saying, rather than, I think one of the biggest problems with the forum is that the written word can come across quite harsh. So like I said, we'll be moving to these different structures, but we are reviewing the forum going forward. And I think State Committee will take a position on that and bring that out to you guys and see where we go with it. But did you want to add anything to that, Mick?
Yeah, I suppose we're looking at a whole bunch of different methods. We're getting our station delegates in place. We found these Facebook Lives have been quite popular. They're great at the time, but also the follow-up hits, we're now putting them onto YouTube as well. And I suppose one of the biggest things I noticed is that there's basically only, at any point in time, regular users were around 200 or so on the forum from what I've seen of the stats. Last week, Leighton and I did the roadshow and hit 10 different meetings and talked to over 600 fireys face to face. So while there might have been a place for the forum, or there still might be a place, I suppose we're looking at that front footing and getting out and actually having those conversations in groups with the members, and again, getting those structures in place where our station delegates are actually talking to their station, getting a clear footing of what they want, and then bringing that back to us. So
yeah, look, when members meet, and look, 2 sub-branches met, recently, and they made a decision, and it was very powerful, and that's where we want to go to. Members getting together, and they have, once they get all the information, that's what unionism is about, making decisions. Now, I suppose a couple of other things that members need to take into account around the forum, because I think there's a misconception with some of it. So we've had problems with, I suppose, access to the forum. We've had, I think through the tolling dispute back in 2014, we actually had members get charged out of comments that they made on the forum. As much as it's a closed place for members, some of our members do like speaking to the boss. And I'm not going to say that anything else past that. So that's one. 2, there's been 2 cases recently, one around, and we need to be careful about this on social media as well, but also in the forum, because the forum's not a safe place. We've got to understand this. The forum, we need to be really careful about that. So there's been 2 cases, court cases recently, where a person lost their job about comments they made on social media, and a platform got fined. So again, like I said, we'll review that and get back that out to you about where we're at. There's one here from Peter Darrick. I'll just quickly have a look at that. Peter Darrick, hi Peter, one of our Western Sydney comrades. There's a lot of chat around LF to SAO promotions. More than happy to have a look at that and have a conversation about that. But, it needs to be a very... Whenever we make changes in the award like that, we need to be careful about how they are going forward. So I think it's a longer conversation we need to have around that. But again, have a chat to your station delegate. I think you are, might even be the station delegate out there, Pete. So we can have a look at that. I'm having a look through here. Quickly on the survey, and there was some really good concepts that came out of that. So hot issues for you guys was training, work health and safety, mental health. Retained wanted to talk about retained to permanent pathways, which obviously for retained that was, there's a good conversation in that. I think we're going to have possibly around the award if we can work
very quickly too, sorry, just before I forget, on the retained issue, we did ask in the last award chat around where the department wanted to give us any talking points on the retained award. They're coming back to that with us in the next few weeks as well. So at the moment, the retained award discussion hasn't started, I suppose, but the department has said they'll get back to us. So important to bring that up. Sorry, I forgot that earlier in the award chat.
Yep. You talked about your concerns about budget cuts and the wages policy. Absolutely agree with you. And members wanted a greater participation and engagement in our union with better, more responsive and services when you need them. And that's what we'll be doing going forward. I suppose some of the wins that we've had, obviously we talked about the cancer legislation. We're obviously part of an ongoing conversation that we have with certainly Fire Rescue, the RFS and the RFSA around our fire districts. I might or may not have reported this last year, but over 6,500 hectares went into the Cumberland Fire District last year. Excuse me. We'll be moving into the southwest of Sydney and certainly the north part of Sydney shortly. I believe they're ongoing. Our Senior Vice President Trevor Ross is our representative on that board now. So if you've got any questions, give him a buzz or send him an email, and he can take you through the process of how we do that. Now, why is that important? Obviously, it solidifies our job. It gives us, keeps us busy, grows our job. Certainly good for our retained members as well. They take on more area and more calls. One of the other things that we did earlier this year, and it's certainly not we haven't signed any documents, so let me be clear about that. But we've come together in having conversations with emergency services unions, so the Police Association, the Ambulance Division of the HSU, and the PSA and their Police Officer Vocational Branch. And so we've got this loose emergency services coalition, and we'll be talking about, hopefully talking about these big ticket items that you guys were discussing around the wages policy, workers' comp, anything at that sort of government level that affects all of us workers, and hopefully use our strength and our might as a coalition to get our voices heard and hopefully make changes. And one of the good things about that is, if you remember back when the budget was released, they tried to cut for new members coming in the accrual of of long service leave. Now, we got up there, we lobbied all the other MPs, and we actually, it was one of the biggest changes to a budget, which opposition don't normally do, to a government's budget bill. So that's the sort of power that we've got in that coalition. Keep an eye on that, because we'll be pushing that with our organising model into the regional areas. Obviously, I don't need to talk to you guys about budget cuts. You know where we're at. We're going to go through a very, very tough year. We've got less money. The government's giving us less money. And certainly some of the work that we were doing around the rescinding of 2008-22, because it's all about budget cuts, let's be clear, is about where our money is and where the money goes in fire rescue. And certainly the President and myself have been pulling apart data. Where we've got to at the moment is that we think that they're close to 100 permanent firefighters short on establishment. Simple as that, straight off the bat. 100 short. It's not due to sick leave. It's about actually being short bums on seats. Now, in our retained component, we're anywhere between 300 and 500 short. Now, this is the problem that fire rescue has. We do not have enough firefighters, and no matter the amount of tolling or any of that other rubbish that they want to do, that's their problem. And it's the government's problem, and we're going to be making it their problem. So we'll be talking more about that over the coming weeks. The President and I are meeting with the new head of People and Culture, Mr. Baldy, about that. But we're quite clear that this isn't about sick leave. We're not going to cop it that firefighters are going to be the excuse of why government cuts our budget. It's about not having enough firefighters, and that's the position we'll be taking going forward. We're sort of getting close to the end. We're trying to keep these things a little bit shorter. I know people are a bit busier. I'll just recap on some of the bigger ticket items, certainly around where we're going with the award. I know everyone was really keen on understanding that process. Let me just pull that up for it. So the way forward for us on the award, at the moment is we've got member engagement going on. So we want the station delegates out there talking to you guys. You can email us. We'll have those discussions. We'll take discussions with the employer. Members will then narrow the scope around that end of November, early December time. Once you guys have narrowed the scope, again, back negotiating with the employer.
Hopefully it's just them sitting upstairs.
Negotiation with the employer, bring those details out to you guys,
I just said
back
you
to
can
the members, voting.
Oh, they
and
can
then
set
hopefully
upstairs separate to here.
We've got an award sorted sometime mid-February. I'll just jump on here to see if there's any more comments. So yeah, there's some stuff around there from LF to SO Promotion Path. Hi Joe Zook, we had a chat about this out of Para. Look, like I said, we'll keep the conversation going. I agree with Brinky there, great point there about one or two delegates with 24-hour shifts. Obviously we're not crossing over anymore. More people getting involved, the better. Totally agree with you. Yeah, comrades' parents' comments are a little bit, I suppose, is probably where we're at. And not sure in this day and age a members' forum is needed. Look, I'm not saying that. I think members do like talking, but that's fine. Lot of chatter. Oh, there's one here from Peter Derrick. Oh, that's the LFLSO. So look, I suppose I'd like to thank everybody for joining in and watching this today. Like I said, we'll be doing a lot more. Every couple of weeks now. I think we'll come back and we'll be talking to you guys about this. Obviously, with the big ticket items around 0822, budget cuts, the award, you guys are going to want to be hearing it straight from the horse's mouth. We might even drag in the other parts of the executive if we can do that. So, did you have anything else to add, comrade?
Oh, look, I think that's the main points. Budget-wise, as Leighton's pointed out, there are cuts to our, potentially our frontline positions. There's been cuts to our budget around station amenities and bits and pieces. We've got PPC at the moment that may or may not be funded. I don't think we've still got confirmation on that. Anywhere up to about 35 mil over 5 years. So, this is a pretty big attack on us. It's not going away anytime soon. It's going to be a long fight. And we'll keep chipping away at that. On the back of that, at the moment, I suppose, as a union, we're in a good position. We've had some good positive media over the last few weeks around a few topics. And as everyone knows, the drought's kicking in around the country, and this is going to be a very hot summer. And as we've been joking about all week at the AGMs, this year really does look like the state is a tinderbox. And while they're slashing our jobs and doing all of that, we've got all that going on in the background. So there's going to be plenty of fights and a lot of work to do. So stay united and get out there and help us organise and get those station delegates in place so we can really capitalise on those opportunities as they arise to keep pushing a good cause for us and for the community.
Look, like I said, big hello out there to Tom Doyle and Dan Fish, Aidan, how's things going? Comments, and even Owen there, how are you? Look, I will recap because I just saw a couple of people come online. Just very quickly, things will be different. We're going to talk to you about it. We're going to get your ideas. You'll be narrowing the scope. Please keep that in your head as you have your conversations around the mess room table. Have station meetings. Have a chat to your station delegate. Hold a sub-branch meeting. Get a hold of your sub-branch secretary and tell us what you think. This is the power of our union. Getting together face to face, meeting with people, having that discussion, like we did last week. It was very inspiring. So. If it's, I suppose, a good night from him.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for tuning in. Look, have a chat with everybody about this stuff. Obviously, I think we've got it on YouTube now. It's a new thing. Hi, Brinky, for logging in or subscribing to YouTube, I think. I'm watching it there. And see you in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you.